Admiral James stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship, Retribution, watching the holographic display as the last remnants of the Galactic hegemony's once mighty armada scattered into the void. 3 years ago, humanity had been an isolated species, unaware of the vastness of galactic civilization. Now they were feared across 12 star systems. "All enemy vessels in retreat, Admiral," Lieutenant Reed reported, her voice steady despite the tension that had gripped the crew for the past 17 hours. "Shall we pursue?" James shook his head. "Let them run. Let them tell the others what happens when you threaten Earth." The battle had been decisive, but it was merely the final confrontation in a war that should never have begun. Earth, by all reasonable metrics, should have been crushed within days of the hegemony's arrival. Instead, humanity had delivered a lesson in warfare so brutal that the galaxy would whisper of it for centuries. It had begun with what the hegemony considered a routine expansion. Emperor Thorian of the Nexus Dominion had ruled over 200 worlds for 3 centuries. His diplomatic corps had encountered thousands of pre-FTL civilizations, all of which had eventually submitted to the protection of the hegemony after witnessing their technological superiority. Earth was supposed to be no different. The hegemony's Ambassador Lord Krell arrived in a ship that blotted out the sun over Geneva, Switzerland. His message was simple. Earth would join the hegemony as a protectorate or face extinction. Humanity had 48 hours to decide. "They're primitives," Krell had told Emperor Thorian via quantum transmission. "Their most advanced weapons are nuclear missiles, and they've barely set foot on their own moon. They'll surrender once the shock wears off." President Rivera of the United Earth Coalition gathered the world's leaders. The debate raged for hours, submission or defiance. In the end, the vote was unanimous. "Tell them," Rivera instructed her communications officer, "that the people of Earth respectfully decline their offer and request they depart our solar system immediately." Krell was amused by the response. As instructed by protocol, he deployed a single warship to demonstrate the hegemony's power. The cruiser, Dominance, positioned itself above the Atlantic Ocean and fired a kinetic rod at an uninhabited island as a warning. The hegemony expected fear, submission. Instead, within 12 minutes of the demonstration, 23 nuclear missiles struck the Dominance, reducing it to fragments. Emperor Thorian was furious. "Impossible," he raged. "Their primitive tracking systems shouldn't have been able to target our vessels." What the hegemony failed to understand was that humans had been preparing for extraterrestrial threats since they first looked up at the stars. While they lacked FTL technology, their military systems had been designed with the paranoid assumption that they might someday face superior forces. The hegemony deployed 12 more vessels. Earth destroyed 7 before the remainder retreated. They're adaptable. In ways we never anticipated, Admiral Vex reported to the Emperor 6 months later. "They've reverse-engineered components from our destroyed vessels. They're now deploying energy weapons based on our technology." What had begun as a simple annexation had evolved into a full-scale war. The hegemony committed 1/3 of its fleet to subjugating the upstart world. They didn't realize that humans excelled at one thing above all others: learning from their enemies. Dr. Tom Williams led the team that decoded the hegemony's FTL principles. Major Anna Peterson's Special Forces captured an intact hegemony scout ship. General Marcus Rivera, the president's brother, coordinated the first human counteroffensive, striking a hegemony outpost in the Alpha Centauri system. Within 18 months, humanity had gone from defending Earth to taking the fight to hegemony space. Emperor Thorian couldn't comprehend it. "How are they advancing so quickly? It took the Lithari a century to develop shield technology after we introduced them to space travel." His science advisor, trembling, explained, "The humans think differently, Your Eminence. They've been imagining wars with alien species in their fiction for centuries. They've played out countless invasion scenarios. When we arrived, they already had theoretical frameworks for how to fight us. By the war's 2nd year, human ships were appearing in hegemony core systems. Not to conquer or occupy, Earth didn't have the numbers for that, but to strike military targets and disappear. They called it sending a message. The hegemony's allies began to distance themselves. The Arcturian collective signed a neutrality pact with Earth. The Rigelian Assembly opened trade relations. Emperor Thorian grew desperate. He ordered the deployment of the planet-killer weapon, Oblivion, against Earth's colony on Mars. The weapon would reduce the planet to rubble, demonstrating the consequences of continued resistance. It was a fatal miscalculation. When Oblivion arrived at Mars, it found not a vulnerable colony, but an ambush. 100 Earth ships emerged from hiding. Positions behind Mars moons. Admiral James personally led the assault on the hegemony's superweapon. The destruction of Oblivion marked the beginning of the end for the hegemony. Now, 3 years after first contact, Admiral James watched the hegemony forces retreat from the Nexus system itself, the heart of their empire. The royal palace on the capital world Empirica lay in ruins. Emperor Thorian had been captured, awaiting trial for war crimes against human colonies. "Message from Earth Command, Admiral," Lieutenant Reed announced. "President Rivera sends her congratulations and orders to accept the hegemony's unconditional surrender." James nodded, thinking of the billions who had died, including millions of humans, all because an empire couldn't imagine that a primitive species could be dangerous. "Send." "Our reply," James said. "Mission accomplished. The galaxy has learned its lesson." As the Retribution prepared to return home, communication specialists across the fleet intercepted transmissions from dozens of worlds that had lived under hegemony rule. They were all asking the same question. Would Earth offer them protection? Now? James smiled grimly. Humanity had never wanted an empire. They had simply wanted to be left alone. But the universe rarely gave people what they wanted. It gave them what they earned. And humanity had earned the galaxy's respect through blood and fire. The stars themselves seemed to burn differently now, illuminating a new era, one where humanity's name would echo through the cosmos not as primitives, but as the species that brought a galactic kingdom to ashes, simply because that kingdom had chosen the wrong planet to threaten. In the great ledger of the universe, the hegemony had made the oldest mistake in existence. They decided to find out what happens when you push too far.